Have you ever had an event that changed you forever? Maybe you didn't even realize how much it impacted you until you started experiencing anxiety, trust issues, or even physical health complications. That's trauma, and it's way more common than you think, and becoming even more common. But here's the thing. Trauma doesn't always look like what you expect. It's not just war veterans or accident survivors. Trauma can be a bad breakup, growing up in a toxic environment, or even the daily stress of gender discrimination. So today, we're breaking it down. What trauma actually is, how it affects your brain and your body, and what you can do if you've been through it. So stick with me, because this is knowledge that could change your life. First off, let's define trauma in simple terms. Trauma is any experience that overwhelms your ability to cope. It creates lasting changes in your brain and body. And it's not just about what happens to you, it's about how your nervous system responds to it. Just to list a few common examples: abuse, growing up in a chaotic home, bullying, racism, or discrimination, losing a loved one suddenly, witnessing violence or a natural disaster, and even medical trauma like serious illness or injury. But here's something surprising. Trauma doesn't always come from one big event. It can also build up over time, little by little, until it leaves a serious impact on your mental health. In other words, not all trauma is the same. In psychology, we talk about two types of trauma: type 1 trauma and type 2 trauma. In type 1 trauma, or single event trauma, we have a one-time shocking event that overwhelms you, like a car accident, a natural disaster, or a sudden assault. In type 2 trauma, chronic, or what we call complex trauma, this happens when stress and danger are prolonged or repeated, and usually occurs when escape is very difficult, if not impossible. Examples include emotional abuse, long-term domestic violence, growing up in a war zone, or oppressive system. In type 1 trauma, people often experience flashbacks, nightmares, and hypervigilance. They remember the exact moment their world changed. In type 2 trauma, you're much more likely to experience deep emotional wounds, trust issues, dissociation, which disrupts memory. It changes how you see yourself and how you see the world. Think of it this way. Type 1 trauma is like an earthquake, sudden and devastating. Everyone feels it. Type 2 trauma is like living in a house that is slowly falling apart, and everyone around you is acting like it's not. Let's look at some examples of situations in today's world that you might not even realize are traumatizing. First off, we have mass layoffs and financial instability. Many people are experiencing the anxiety of job loss. Studies show that job insecurity can trigger trauma-like symptoms, affect confidence, self-worth, and even cause further PTSD-like reactions. Then we have increased online harassment, particularly through social media. Cyberbullying and cancel culture can create real psychological damage because the brain processes social rejection the same way as physical pain. On top of that, we have increased racial and cultural trauma. Communities are experiencing increased systemic oppression while having already experienced violence over generations, leading to what we call intergenerational trauma, stress that is passed down from parents to children. Also, we are all survivors of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us are still struggling with the psychological impact of isolation, loss, and increased uncertainty. We're talking about a global trauma event that changed billions of lives. The point is, trauma is everywhere. It doesn't just happen to other people. It affects all of us in different ways. And because it is so familiar to us, we might not realize this can be traumatizing. So maybe you're thinking, okay, but how do I know if I have trauma? Well, here are some signs that past trauma might be affecting you right now. First, we have mental signs: increased anxiety and symptoms of depression, intrusive thoughts or thoughts that enter into your mind against your will. And then there's emotional numbness. Behavioral signs include anxious avoidance or avoiding situations that feel scary, troubles trusting people, and increased fears of abandonment or rejection. Physical signs include chronic pain, headaches, autoimmune and abdominal issues. And lastly, relationship signs include increased fear of intimacy, increased people-pleasing, and struggling with boundaries. Remember, your body remembers trauma even when your mind doesn't. The good news is healing is possible. Trauma might shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. Here's what you can do starting now. First off, acknowledge it. Denial keeps trauma stuck. Naming your pain is the first step to healing. Next up, work on regulating your nervous system. Focus on deep breathing, exercise, and mindfulness to help calm your fight or flight response. Then, either build or access your support system. Healing happens in safe relationships. Reach out to people who uplift you. Then, focus on rewriting your story. Your trauma is a part of you, but it's not your whole identity. Decide what you want the next chapter of your life to be and pursue it. Your future is yet to be written, after all. And lastly, if you still need additional help, don't be afraid to seek therapy. Therapies like EMDR or somatic therapy can help rewire your brain in the right ways. Healing takes time, but you are not broken. You are resilient, and you can reclaim your life. If this video hit home for you, please drop a comment and let me know. Have you experienced trauma in your life? What helped you heal? Also, hit that subscribe button for more psychology-backed insights to help you live your best life. You are stronger than your trauma, and you are not alone. I'll see you in the next video.